few songs really capture the late 90s, like Lit's track My Own Worst Enemy. While Lit was painted by those in the press and probably in the public as an overnight success, they labored for almost a decade, changing musical styles several times before they came up with their hit song. In today's video, let's talk about the history of My Own Worst Enemy. The band's origins begin with frontman AJ Popoff and his brother Jeremy, who is 2 years older. They would hail from Fullerton in Orange County. It was at the age of 7 Jeremy would learn to play a few songs on a Hammond organ that belonged to his maternal grandfather, Ray Watson. Their grandfather was actually a touring drummer and singer playing in a jive-swing band post-World War II. Their grandfather soon bought Jeremy his own organ while he bought AJ a drum kit. Their father, meanwhile, was a disc jockey who used the moniker AJ Martin in the 70s and early 80s, and he would work at the LA station KIIS-FM before moving to Westwood One, where he would have a nationally syndicated radio program. He would bring home stacks and stacks of records with the Popoff's living room containing thousands of pieces of vinyl, as Baba Booey would say. The brothers would also take a liking to hard rock and metal during the 80s, being into groups like Rat, Dokken, the Scorpions, Van Halen, and Metallica. It was a concert that their father took them to when they were 8 and 10, a UFO Iron Maiden show at the Long Beach Arena, that the siblings finally realized they wanted to become musicians. They were especially enamored with Iron Maiden's performance, who at that time was fronted by Paul Di'Anno. It was in 1984 that AJ would meet a bass player named Kevin Baldus in junior high or high school. Baldus was also into the same 80s hard rock and metal that AJ was into. It was by 1988 AJ and Kevin would form the group Razzle. Razzle soon started playing shows on the Sunset Strip, and believe it or not, they garnered a pretty big following, even selling at places like the Whiskey and the Roxy. Keep in mind, they were teenagers at this time and they were making good money. It was in 1993 Razzle would put out an EP, but they were starting to outgrow the music they'd previously been into. It just so happened that they got into alternative and so-called grunge music, which was popular at the time, citing Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots as some of their biggest influences. They wanted to reinvent themselves and rebuild. They literally threw out the Rolodex of all their hard-earned contacts that they'd established up until this point, and it was now 1994. Adopting a new moniker, Stain, which was inspired by the Nirvana song, the musicians would find a rundown warehouse space in Anaheim. They'd spend the next 6 months trying to shake their past and come up with a new sound. The band soon befriended a woman named Ruta Zepedes, who worked as an intern for hitmaker Desmond Child. She would eventually go on to become Lit's manager. It turned out though that a band in Ohio already had the name Stain, so they had to once again come up with a new moniker. In 1995, they became Lit. The new sound the band had come up with was heavily influenced by grunge and post-grunge acts, and the majority of the audience that they had accumulated with Razzle was long gone when they became Lit. The next few years were pretty tough for the band, but they were driven to succeed. Every penny that they earned, they would reinvest it into the band, saving up for demos, posters, and equipment. They became very DIY during this period, and it wasn't uncommon to see their flyers plastered on the off-ramps and electrical boxes around Orange County. But it wasn't just hard work that helped them in their career, as luck, of course, also played an important part. One of the early gigs that Lit played was at a club where only 3 people were present, one of which was their manager. But one of the other 2 people was an A&R guy who worked for the company Malicious Vinyl. Lit soon found a home and signed to the label, and the company would release their debut record, 1997's Tripping the Light Fantastic. But the run-up to release their first album was a long, arduous process. With Jeremy telling the Reno Gazette-Journal, there was a lot of waiting around and being frustrated and disillusioned with the industry. There were so many problems with that label that the record didn't come out until April of 1997. Once the album did come out, the label, being quite small, did very little to promote it. One interview with the band seemed to indicate that their label soon went under, and Lit were now without a home. But over the next year or so, things slowly started to look up for the band. It would be an A&R guy for EMI Music Publishing named Matt Messer, who frequently visited Orange County looking for acts to sign, came across Lit when they were performing at the LA club The Viper Room. By this point, the band still weren't attracting huge crowds and they hadn't really changed their sound. At the Viper Room that night were about 5 to 6 people, including their manager once again, but the A&R man loved the energy the band played with. He would recall seeing Lit performing the song Fireman from their first record, a performance that saw frontman AJ using a floor tom with mallets that were on fire to bang out the opening of the song. Messer would end up signing the band to a publishing deal, and the publishing deal was advantageous to Lit because EMI had their own recording studio. This would afford the band the ability to start recording demos that they could shop around to labels. Lit, by 1998 or so, would make the decision to change their sound. They realized that they could still be hard and edgy, but they just wanted to simplify their songs. They would look back at the pop rock records that the Popoff brothers grew up listening to in their father's living room for inspiration. Kevin would tell an interviewer, "I don't think AJ was all excited about screaming all the time. He wanted to sing a little more. It was just a matter of taste. We all grew up on Iron Maiden and Metallica, and we grew up on Elton John and Billy Joel all combined." Lit by now were writing a ton of new songs. One of the songs written during this period would be the track My Own Worst Enemy, a song whose origins dated back to early 1998. AJ was driving a 1963 Cadillac DeVille, and he was scraping by. His gas tank meter was broken, so he had to meticulously keep track of his odometer reading, knowing that his vehicle got 8 miles to the gallon. He'd continually scribble the mileage on a paper pad, and one day while he was gassing up outside of a Circle K ahead of band practice, he heard this lyric in his head.
It's no surprise to me, I am my own worst enemy, 'cause every now and then I kick the living out of me.
AJ went to his car, got his notepad, and wrote that lyric. The next piece of the song would be that memorable opening guitar riff which Jeremy came up with. The band started to play along with Jeremy, but AJ wasn't sure what to sing. But then he remembered that lyric he jotted down at the gas bar. Based on interviews that the members gave, it seemed like the song was written pretty quickly, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Jeremy would tell Spin magazine the origin of the hit song, stating, "The song is a result of waking up and realizing you screwed up the night before. The first verse is about screwing up with your chick. AJ's the king of having 4 ex-girlfriends show up to the same show. It's funny watching him trying to juggle." AJ would add the song's lyrics came together not from one but many incidents, and he would claim that he sang the song naked in the studio. The studio version that Lit ended up coming up with was pretty close to the demo. In fact, AJ would recall to Spin, "Back in those days when we were writing a song, we would put filler words in there just to have something to sing, something to chew on while we were making it. Then we would get closer, we'd go back to those, and then we'd go in and fine-tune the words before we would demo them up or record them or whatever. But that one just took off from under us. We demoed it up the way it was because people were freaking out." The song is mostly autobiographical, admitting to screwing up, but at the same time not saying you won't do it again. Lit would premiere the song live for the first time at the Troubadour sometime in late 1998, and the audiences and even their fellow bands freaked out. Fellow Orange County band Zebrahead, who was already signed by this point in time, was at that show and would tell one of the members of Lit that the song was going to be a massive hit. Lit by this point were attracting pretty big audiences, and the label reps started showing up more to their shows. Lit would finally end up getting a record deal with RCA Records after reps for the label heard their demo and saw them perform My Own Worst Enemy. The band would head to NRG Recording Studio in North Hollywood with producer Don Gilmore, who had previously worked with Linkin Park and Eve 6. The songs were about 90 to 95% finished by this point, and RCA would issue A Place in the Sun on February 23, 1999. The title would be a reference to Frank Sinatra's old stomping ground in Vegas, the Sands Hotel. Lit's sound would see comparisons to Third Eye Blind, early Elvis Costello, and even fellow Orange County rocker Social Distortion. The band's manager would admit that payola was pretty common at this time, meaning that labels were paying radio stations to play their artists' music. She believed in My Own Worst Enemy so much, she forbade RCA from using payola to get the band's song on radio stations, as she felt it would hurt the band's legitimacy. So she asked RCA to call certain radio stations and markets to tell them that they would be getting the lead single My Own Worst Enemy early. The song would be sent to a station in St. Louis, which was in fact the first station in the country to play the song. Then by January of 1999, a month before the album's release, K-Rock started playing the song, and the label and the band were surprised at the response. My Own Worst Enemy was being played almost every 2 hours on K-Rock, and the audience was eating it up. By April, My Own Worst Enemy would top the alternative airplay charts, where it stayed for 11 consecutive weeks. Couple this with heavy play on MTV, and the song was pretty much inescapable. It soon became one of the most popular songs of the summer of '99. The success of My Own Worst Enemy resulted in A Place in the Sun going gold by June of '99 and platinum by October. It would eventually go on to sell nearly 1.5 million copies. Lit would have 2 more successful singles on the record, including Miserable and Ziploc, with them peaking at number 3 and 11 on the charts. Lit would go on to release records in the subsequent years, but they would never be able to recapture the success of A Place in the Sun. Lit has been pretty active on the touring circuit since then. Spin magazine would look back at 25 years of My Own Worst Enemy, and they would claim that today My Own Worst Enemy gets played more than it did in 1999 because of multiple formats, and it still gets used heavily in tons of movies, TV shows, and even video games. I remember it appearing on disc in Rock Band 2 back in 2008. Not only that, but Spin would write that the song has been unofficially adopted by the National Hockey League as a crowd sing-along at different arenas. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.